Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our December 16th, 2024 holiday edition of Week to Week, the Political Roundtable from Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. If you have a cell phone with you, please put it on silent or turn it off. I'm John Zipper. I'm your host for Week to Week, and I'm also the Commonwealth Club's Vice President of Media and Editorial. And I'm very glad to see you here tonight in the auditorium, as well as everyone watching and listening online. So, we've got a new president, a new Congress, both houses, a new mayor here in San Francisco. There's going to be a new mayor in Oakland, new DA coming in Oakland, and all kinds of things. And they all have old problems that they're all going to have to deal with. So we're going to get into some of that with our panel. Let's meet them for tonight. I'm going to start on the far end with Bob Gardner, who is making his debut at the Week to Week, but he is not a stranger to the stage at the Commonwealth Club. In fact, he used to be on our board of governors back in the 90s. He's the CEO of the Advocacy Group. He's a veteran Republican advertising maker and strategist, and he's the right side columnist for the Sonoma Index Tribune. So hello, Bob. Next to him is Doug Sovereigns, a political reporter for KCBS Radio, and you can follow him on X at Sovereign Nation. Welcome back, Doug.
Thank you, John.
And our returning champion is Carla Marinucci. She's a political journalist. You know her from her longtime work as a senior political writer at the San Francisco Chronicle. She's also the former writer for the Politico California Playbook, and she's on Threads at Carla Marinucci. Welcome, Carla. So we're going to start with the big topic, and that is we have a new president-elect who's going to be our new president, who's also going to be, I guess, our old new president. But, and Carla brought this up in some correspondence we were doing beforehand, which is that he's already acting as president. So Carla, kind of the rollout of Trump 2.0, the redo.
The Iron Throne is already set up, and people are bending the knee all over the place. And I mean, this topic I brought up to you after watching the opening of Notre Dame, where the pièce de résistance for Emmanuel Macron was having Trump come in at the last minute and sit at the seat of honor after having trilateral meetings with Macron and Zelensky. Yeah. And my thought was, where are the Democrats? Why aren't they speaking up? Where's Joe Biden? He wasn't there. Jill Biden was there. But at this point, you're watching media. You're bend the knee. You're watching the tech guys bend the knee. You're watching other Democratic politicians bend the knee. Why aren't the Democrats speaking up is what I'm wondering. As the appointments are rolling out, they seem to be incredibly silent.
They're going to have a lot of knee pain, and it won't be covered under his concepts of a plan. So no, there's no question that they're all, swearing fealty, or at least going through the motions of that. I think that happens with, any new president, any new administration. They all want to curry favor. They want to be on, even if they were against Trump before, they want to be on his good side now. They're going to want something later. They're going to give money to the inaugural fund. So that doesn't surprise me too much. But I do think Trump, he's hit the ground running in a way this time that he didn't last time. Because if you remember 8 years ago, he didn't think he was going to win. No one did. He didn't expect to win. It took him a while to organize his administration. This time, he obviously had a plan in place of who he wanted and what positions. There's Project 2025, whether he's admitting they're using it or not. So he was able to, roll things out more quickly. And Joe Biden, as we all know from the campaign that didn't happen, he's tired, he's done, and he's not, he's ready to go, and he's not going to, do much in this final month other than sign some papers and pardon some people. And I think he's content to let Trump and I think the Democrats are kind of resigned. I mean, they're defeated, they're resigned,
exhausted.
Okay, they're exhausted, and they're, all right, he's going to take over. Let's see what happens.
Well, if that speaking of Democrats being quiet, that if Chuck Schumer is quiet, everybody's quiet. So the fact that he's not said a word, but I think you're right. I mean, it's a new administration, although I think this is the first time that I can remember that the incoming president, the president-elect, has had so much coverage and so much power. It's like Biden doesn't exist.
I mean, to me, it's just been really incredible to watch. Let's just take the media front. ABC $15 million to his
Explain
library.
that if you would, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Trump sued ABC and George Stephanopoulos after Stephanopoulos in a broadcast referred to Trump being
Liable.
Liable for rape. Found liable for
found
rape.
liable for saying that Trump was a rapist.
Right. When in fact it was sexual abuse.
It was sexual assault, but even the judge said, well, in New York, it's a very narrow definition. But basically, I mean, ABC sort of caved here on this one in a way that can really affect media, because Trump in his press conference today said he's going to be suing the Washington Post over Russia. He's going to sue
60 Minutes.
Yeah, 60 Minutes.
He
that's
likes
the
to
other one.
sue people.
Yeah, and this is all, okay. So ABC, LA Times, the publisher there, has said he's going to create a bias meter. He's already put some of the editorials on hold down there.
And he put $1 million into the
Mark Benioff, one of the biggest Democratic donors, who heads Time magazine, was there at the New York Stock Exchange with Trump, helping him to ring the bell and chanting USA, USA. And of course, Time named him Man of the Year. I mean, on the media front, this is getting kind of interesting.
Well, Trump would say it's about time.
Yes, he would. But I mean, and then you've got the tech guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent there's an element of fear. People, they just saw what happened. They're afraid of Trump. They're afraid of what his block of voters will do. They want to be on his good side. Benioff's an interesting one. I'm sure many people in this room know a lot about Mark Benioff, long time, fourth generation
Yes.
San Franciscan, maybe the biggest philanthropist in the Bay Area, certainly one of them, big Democratic donor. And, it's a new president. There's nothing wrong with saying we want him to succeed. We wish him well. We want what's best for our country. It'll be a short honeymoon, perhaps. But at the moment, he's getting that honeymoon, and they want to be on his good side. But in a couple of months, if things, he's taking steps that are unpopular, if things aren't going well, a lot of these people will distance themselves from him again and become his critics again. But at the moment, I think that, they don't want to piss him off.
And I think it's interesting, too, when you talk, another Bay Area connection is the tech guys. When you talk about philanthropy, Mark Zuckerberg, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative,
Right.
never has donated to a president before. But Meta has given $1 million to the Trump inauguration. Trump said today at the press conference that Sergey Brin has gone down to have lunch with him. And Tim Cook from Apple, Sam Altman is another one who's given $1 million to the Trump. So the Trump
Sam Altman, who is part of the transition team for Mayor-elect Dan Lurie.
There we go. So they're all lining up and throwing cash at him.
Well, do we know, maybe this is just that Mar-a-Lago has really, really good food?
I will say on that ABC thing quickly on Stephanopoulos, he said what many people have said. Oh, he was found liable for rape. No, it was sexual assault. And as you said, the judge said, well, essentially the judge said, you committed rape, but in our state, rape is defined here, so we're going to call it this.
Right.
I'm sure, many people, I probably have misspoken on the radio and said rape when I meant sexual, in the context of this Trump case. And he went after Stephanopoulos and ABC and probably would not have won.
No, that's
because you have
right.
to prove malice aforethought. You have to prove that you knew what you were saying was not true. And I think it was just a
Reckless disregard for the truth has always been the...
And I don't think that's the case, but ABC caved and $15 million bucks.
And now you've got to wonder what the chilling effect is going to be
I
on
think
media.
it will have a chilling effect.
So you guys are media people. Why do you think they caved?
I mean, their exposure couldn't have been too much more than that. And I don't think, I don't know all the evidence of the case. I would imagine they would have won. I don't know. I think they just wanted to make it go away.
Disney's the parent company, and I think, this is what we're seeing is corporations.
They want to be on Trump's good side.
They want to be on his good side. And really, it's not just corporations, because we've seen some major Democrats. You mentioned, Chuck Schumer hasn't said anything, but say Ro Khanna, for instance, has said, well, Elon Musk, not such a bad guy. Maybe we can get together and talk about health care with him. There's a few other, I think Blumenthal was another one who said, Elon Musk, great guy.
Richard Blumenthal, the senator?
Yes, he came out and sort of, at this point, I think it's not just Trump they're afraid of. I also think it's Elon Musk, who's going to be incredibly
But again, I think
Yeah.
this might be short-lived. We'll see what happens after 3 months, 6 months, if things start to sour when Trump doesn't suddenly give everybody a free carton of eggs and lower the cost of bacon and bread. Things may shift, and we'll see how that plays out. And if people still treat him the same way as they are right now.
Well, I think it's inevitable that they shift. It always happens. And there's these giant egos of not egos, but backed up by tons of money, and they're used to getting their own way, and they're not going to be, nobody's going to get their own way. Yeah. Even Trump won't be able to get it. There's something called the Senate still.
I wonder how the giant egos of, the ego has landed with Musk and Trump. How long is that marriage going to last? Yeah. Musk and Trump. I mean, can they really coexist? I mean, I was looking into past, I did a segment on this on the radio today, so I was looking into it. Past relationships between presidents and, industrialists, robber barons, they haven't lasted long and they haven't gone well. Because you're talking about very rich, powerful people, as you say, who are used to getting their own way and have big egos. And then Trump, who, what matters most to him is swearing loyalty to him. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how that,
I mean, it's been interesting to see how much Elon Musk is joined at the hip with Trump at every event. I mean, he was his date at the Notre Dame opening, and he was there, right next to Melania wasn't there. It was Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. And, Musk has made, just since the election, has made $200 billion.
With Tesla stock going up.
Tesla stock, everything. Yeah. I mean, everything's right. So I have to think, Trump has to be, worried about him and his power as well. I mean, he does own the world's biggest media platform in X. Mm-hmm. With, 250 million users.
And he is a real billionaire, unlike Trump.
Yeah.
Right. Richest man in the world.
Right. I mean, at this point, worth $300 million. This is yet another area, John, I think, where Democrats have failed to speak up on this whole DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency.
Which takes two people to run, apparently. It's quite efficient.
Yeah. And there is this thing called the GAO, which is supposed to do this anyway, right? But they haven't spoke up, even though Musk has already had his run-ins with agencies that have that oversee his businesses, whether it's the SEC or the FAA or the IRS, right? And yet now he's in a position to be able to cut these agencies and to basically cut regulations.
He doesn't have power.
He has no power.
He doesn't have power, but
he certainly is going to.
He has influence.
Yeah. Well, he's running this with Vivek Ramaswamy.
Right.
It'll be an advisory role, but they have willing partners in Congress in the Republican majority. I mean, I imagine they're going to come in and, we all love when an efficiency expert shows up at work, right, and tells you what to do. I assume that's what they're going to do, and they're going to make recommendations, which will then be presented, and somebody will write legislation. How much of it actually happens, we're going to have to see.
Well, just being the old person here.
Because we're so young.
Before it was Office of Management and Budget, before it was OMB, it was called the Bureau of the Budget.
Right.
And I think it was in the 70s or the 60s where they changed the name to Office of Management and Budget, and that was supposed to be managing and each department and agency, and that was the whole thing, and GAO was part of that. Right. So it's not as though this never happened, but it's never really happened. So whether they can do it with DOGE or not is I think everybody agrees that no matter what side you're on, that there's gross inefficiencies in the government, but having said that, now what?
Well, exactly, and when you look at Elon's history, let's just take Twitter here. Cutting 70% of the staff overnight. There was reports, if you've read the Walter Isaacson book, where he cut things like toilet paper and people had to bring their own. I mean, this is a guy who really doesn't care about workers' conditions, and that goes for Tesla, where 20,000 people work at that Fremont plant as well. I mean, there are some tough conditions there, and if you talk to anybody who worked at Twitter. Same situation where the empathy is not really one of his strong suits, and when it comes to cutting jobs and cutting to the bone, everybody agrees this is what this guy likes to do. Now, when you're talking about government agencies that are in charge of clean air, clean water, safety regulations for people, and other things that are going to affect his bottom line, you've got to worry about what he's going to recommend.
I don't think he'll get everything he wants, but I think we're going to find there's a larger constituency for making cuts that hurt than we would have thought.
Except that they will hurt thousands, maybe tens of thousands of federal employees.
Oh, yes.
And the economy. There's going to be a massive impact on the economy if suddenly you lay off millions of workers and deport millions of people. We can get into that some more. But yeah, there's definitely going to be an unanticipated, and he even admits, Musk admits, there could be short-term pain and it could, crash things for a little while, but long-term it might be better. That may be true, but we'll see how much people can stomach that short-term pain.
Yeah, well, this crash things for a little while is where I find that this is interesting that you're right. Musk has said that. Yeah.
He can withstand a crash.
Yeah. People,
Well,
right?
Musk's workers don't have civil service protection.
No,
Right.
no, they
Or they're
don't.
not unionized.
No,
Exactly.
no.
So that's a
At
different,
Tesla, they're not
different deal.
either, right?
Right.
Well, we've seen administrations move against union. I mean, we all remember, I think we're all old enough to remember
Ronald Reagan.
and was it the PATCO?
That's right.
Air traffic controllers.
Yeah,
That's right.
air traffic. About a year ago, I took a Lyft ride, and the guy's license plate had something about PATCO on it. So we got into a talk, and so that was in, 1981, 82? This guy was still super angry about being laid off as part of PATCO.
I always found it ironic that they renamed National Airport in D.C. Reagan National Airport after he fired all the air traffic controllers.
Well, okay, so speaking about egos and controversy, let's get into some of the cabinet picks and senior advisor picks that have been either floated or have actually been announced. And let's start with the one that has actually already crashed and burned, Matt Gaetz. Bob,
Yeah.
this was bound to be controversial. You think it was made perhaps to be controversial?
Well,
perhaps?
or that, or maybe it was a setup. I mean, he wasn't very well liked in Congress. He got rid of McCarthy. And so this way, it was a twofer. He had to drop out. He was not going to be Attorney General, and he's not in Congress anymore. And apparently he's going to do a podcast.
A win-win.
And
So
he
who
kept,
knows? I mean, whether that's true or not. But I'm blanking. Is it the defense, Hegseth? Is that it?
Yeah, Hegseth.
Okay. So he's making a comeback. I mean, he was DOA a week ago, 10 days ago. And now he's gone around and talked to lots of senators, and he's been well coached by people like me. And so.
We should point out, not by you, but
No,
by
people
like
like
you.
the kind of thing Bob used to do.
Just as a side note, I really wanted to be a consultant on the Harris campaign. I could have retired. But anyway, he seems to be, and also I don't buy the fact that he has not been a manager or a head of a big company or whatever, because you don't manage the Defense Department. Nobody can manage the Defense Department. They call it the building. Like the building has its own life, meaning the Pentagon. And so that doesn't mean that he can't be a good Secretary of Defense, but to me, there were a lot more qualified people that Trump could have picked. I mean, I'm still not sure where this came from, except that he was on Fox.
I just want to know that Bob knows about this because he was very close with Dick Cheney once upon a time, so he knows
That's
a
right.
lot about
That's right.
what happens. But Matt Gaetz, whether that was a setup or not, they got him out of the House, but to his benefit, they didn't get to release the ethics committee investigation, which helped him. It was hard for me to believe that Trump really took him seriously as a nominee, but it seemed, on its face, it seemed that was what they were trying to put through. And now you've got, Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard for intelligence, Robert Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services. Those three are the ones who are most in jeopardy, but they're all making the rounds. And it does seem like they're shoring up support, and they may all eventually get confirmed. He thought he was going to get people in easily. He'd do recess appointments. None of that's going to happen.
No.
They're going to be confirmation hearings, and some of them are going to be contentious. And they'll be in January, so he's going to have to stick with the acting people who are already there. How long does Trump stick with the people who are, who are twisting in the wind, like Hegseth or
So
or
this is where I was going to go. So we mentioned Hegseth kind of making a bit of a comeback. He was getting really close to it looking like DOA.
Yeah.
Joni Ernst, the senator from Iowa.
Yes, Iowa.
A sexual assault survivor from the military, from what I've heard, was very much not in his camp, has flipped.
Yeah.
So,
And she was being talked about as a possible replacement for
Replacement.
defense secretary if he couldn't be confirmed.
yeah, it was
Maybe she
her
decided
or
she didn't
George
want it.
Santos.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But I mean, if she flipped, do you really have any?
I think a
expectation
lot will depend on whether more reporting comes out. The New Yorker's been doing very intense reporting on him, and so have other people back on the East Coast. I think by the time this hearing comes up, you may hear more about this, and that may change the game. The question is, how many of these appointees can Trump lose?
Right.
And there's so many that are controversial. I mean, at least in my mind, I think the Robert F. Kennedy one is the most dangerous
Talk about it.
for.
Yeah, and I'm sure
for the
I've
United
interviewed
States.
him many times, and I think you've covered
Yeah.
him quite a bit. And,
Yes.
I mean, the guy used to be a mainstream environmentalist and went off the rails somewhere, maybe after the worm ate his brain. I don't know. That'll do that to you, you know.
Or after he chopped off the whale head and
That's
stuck
right,
it
or
on the car.
the bear in the
Right.
Central Park. Anyway, but the last 10 years, yeah, he's espoused a lot of pretty wacko things. And in fact, now that I think about it, it was at a Commonwealth Club event, which I was covering, where he said that autism caused by vaccines was a Holocaust and had to apologize for that.
Sorry.
What's that?
I mean, on behalf of the Commonwealth
Yes,
Club.
right. Yeah. It was. I don't think this building was here yet, but it was at a Commonwealth Club event.
Okay, all right,
When
well-
that happened, and it became a huge brouhaha, and. But he is trying to rehabilitate his reputation. Today, he was out on Capitol Hill saying, "Oh no, I support the polio vaccine." Trump said, "I support the polio." I was like, we have to get up and say we support the polio vaccine? This is what it's come to. Something that eradicated a major disease. I had a friend say, well, if they get rid of daylight saving time, that's it. I'm out of the. I said, don't worry, you'll have polio by then, so you won't be going out much. So, who needs sunshine? But I mean, that is where he is now.
And cavities, because he's going to get rid of fluoride
in the
on day
water.
one.
Although there's some
I mean,
debate
I
on
think
that.
he has the potential to be the most danger to our kids, to our health. When you're talking about even Trump, you heard Trump today at the press conference sort of parrot saying, well, I'm not really in support of mandating vaccines.
Right.
Well, measles, is one of the most communicable and a dangerous disease. It's deadly for kids. I just think the fact that he's got a lawyer out there talking about revoking the polio.
Well, they distanced
They
themselves.
distance
from
themselves
him.
from that, but the fact is, he has the potential in so many ways to hire people and to put in policies that can affect the health of millions of children. And when you're talking about, he's promised doing away with fluoride on day one, whether he can do that or not. But the fact is, Hegseth, yeah, maybe the generals will send him off to look at aircraft carriers and, send him around the world and he won't do anything. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard the same, maybe, but RFK Jr. has the potential to really do some damage.
Well, someone that touches on something that someone's brought up, which is that this was in a conversation about how these were national security experts, and they were getting into the whole Tulsi Gabbard being a kind of the
Right.
sort of
An
really
asset.
scary thing. But then they quoted someone else who also was like them, a hawkish national security person, saying she's not. I mean, her job basically is seeing what the president gets to see. She's not the one actually doing analysis and
Right.
stuff like that. It's who is underneath her.
Yeah.
And I don't know enough about the
Intelligence
But if our
structure.
allies don't trust the agencies,
Okay.
or believe her to be an asset of Russia, or then we have people who suffer, abroad.
This
our
could improve our
intelligence.
relations with
Right,
Russia.
and right. I mean, that is the danger there. But you're right. There are other people who are well schooled in intelligence and who understand and can maybe.
I think Roseanne
put
Barr
her-
is going to be
shift her to the side or not. Right. And
I think this just shows how important the new chief of staff is, because there's an old saying in Washington that the minute somebody gets confirmed for a cabinet position, they become the enemies of the White House because they get captured by the bureaucracy. And it doesn't happen immediately, of course, but that's what the deep state is good at this. And so when somebody steps out of line, let's say RFK is confirmed, it's going to be up to her to say, you're really pissing off the president and the West Wing. And so cut it out. So you're not going to talk about fluoride. You're not going to talk about vaccines. Just do your job. There's a lot to do there without riling up the American public.
I mean, it is true that,
Yeah.
they all serve at the pleasure of the president, and cabinet secretaries don't typically go rogue with policies that aren't coming from the White House. And yes, she's the first woman to be White House Chief of Staff, Pat Summerall's daughter.
Right, right.
yeah.
Susie Wiles,
Yeah.
who ran a great campaign
She
for him.
ran
There's
a-
no question.
yeah,
I mean,
she
a very
knows what
smart
she's
woman.
doing. She's smart.
My question, Bob, is why shouldn't she be speaking up now when some of these appointments, Matt
That's not
Gaetz
really the Chief of
is-
Staff's role.
No?
No.
Not publicly,
Not
no.
publicly.
Oh,
No,
okay.
you're
You
dead.
got to stay behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You rarely hear from a chief of staff publicly, so I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, she might be the one saying, you know what, time to cut this guy loose, or,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Because, I mean, I think they'll all get a fairly short leash. Tulsi Gabbard, if she's confirmed, I don't know that she will be. I mean, DNI, so she's overseeing the other intelligence chiefs. But as you said, she's just sort of a bureaucrat at the top. The information's being funneled, but she does serve an advisory role, in an important position with the president.
And you never, no matter what administration, you never want to get more ink or more airtime than the boss.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Certainly when it's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
the last thing. Anyone who overshadows him is gone.
But I think the one other appointee that we have to worry about is Kash Patel for FBI director. Let's remember that the FBI is such an important agency, and I think people don't understand that we haven't had a domestic terrorism event here in the United States, and the
9/11.
FBI is the organization in charge of that. The CIA cannot, within the United States, cannot handle that. So we've had it since 9/11, right? In part because the FBI has done a great job.
They have thwarted so many things we don't know about.
Yeah.
Yes,
What they've
right.
prevented, yeah.
But here you have Kash Patel with an enemies list, who's already kind of said what his priorities are going to be. I mean, if anything happens on the domestic terrorism front, that's going to be, some people have said blood on Donald Trump's hands.
Yeah, but let me be the, and I'm not a Trump apologist, I think everyone knows that, but let me be the
Devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate, yes.
For decades, we had an FBI director who weaponized it, used it to blackmail senators, blackmail
Sure.
presidents,
course.
completely ignored organized crime, if not actually playing footsie with it.
Allowed it to flourish.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the history of the FBI, it's actually been a fairly short time that we think it's been a really great, Mulder Scully
Effective
sort of
agency.
grand agency. But all this does, someone asked, in fact, about what we've been talking about, which is
Right.
that what they're saying is grossly unqualified cabinet nominees and the the lack of qualifications. And early on, when some of these more controversial picks were put out there, someone was saying they kind of wondered if he was making some, and that Donald Trump wasn't expecting a number of these to go through, but with the expectation that, okay, he will have his opponents, both in his party and Democrats, will have fought these people down, and it'll be easier for them then for him to get his second wave through.
Yeah, and there is the theory that put out outrageous people, and then when they get defeated, the people he really wants won't seem so outrageous, and they'll be more easily confirmed. I mean, there may be something to that. I don't think he's deliberately wasting a lot of time and energy on people he doesn't really want in his cabinet. It just seems counterproductive, and Elon Musk would call it inefficient. But I think I think their backup plan is, look, we'll have an easier time getting through someone who may not seem so outrageous, who would have if they were the initial nominee. I mean, that's giving him a lot of Machiavellian credit that maybe he doesn't deserve. But I mean, it's possible that there's this grand scheme afoot. But I think it's more that he actually he wants these people. And if he doesn't get them, he's got backup choices that we may find objectionable too. But,
Bob, do you think Lara Trump is going to be the next U.S. Senator from Florida?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I thought so until apparently DeSantis is not on board with this. I don't know who he's for. Maybe himself, but
Yeah.
He'll need an exit.
He doesn't
But-
seem like a senator type.
what? Well,
DeSantis does not seem like a Senate
no,
type
but
to me.
I don't think it's out of the question
He was in the House. Yeah,
get the nomination.
yeah, it could be. Yeah,
The
to replace
appointment,
Marco Rubio.
Right, who I don't think anyone is freaking out about
that's
him as
actually
Secretary
one
of
of the-
State.
yeah.
I mean, it's always, when you appoint a senator, your colleagues are going to confirm you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
appointing a senator, Secretary of State, that's not going to be a problem. He'll be confirmed.
That's one of the more rational.
Well, there was an exception to that, John Tower.
Oh, that's true, John Tower.
yes.
If you remember John Tower, which I don't know if people do, what was it that killed it? What was it? He had like
Booze. I mean,
a drinking problem.
He referred to his drinking as spirits of alcohol.
Right. He had a drinking problem, not even a major one by some current standards, but that's all it was. Oh, no, we can't have him. I mean, now it's like, oh, is that all you have? Okay, right this way. Come on in. I mean, that was, think how
Exactly.
quaint that would seem now if that's all someone
Yeah.
had was a drinking
That's how
problem.
Dick Cheney got to be Secretary of Defense
Really?
when he went down.
When Tower went down?
Yeah.
Well, look at
Well,
that.
Hegseth did say at one point he would, if he got the position as Secretary of Defense, he would quit drinking.
Yes.
It's like, that's where his commitment on it is. It's like, give me the job and I'll think about it.
Yeah,
But,
that's exactly.
Okay, well, let's go in a bit more into the election, both from the Democrats' side and the Republican side. I mean, we've talked about Democrats, I think both probably right, many of them right here in the seats and listening, but as well as just across the country, party leaders and such being a bit kind of exhausted at this point.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thumping.
No.
They lost control of Washington completely, but it was a very close presidential election, and the House is even closer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Trump did not end up with a majority. He's at 49.78
That's right.
percent, just under 50%. Certainly not a mandate, as he was claiming originally. He won by about 1.5% over Harris. But he did win the popular vote, which no one expected him to.
Yeah.
Right.
And certainly hadn't happened. And he's the first Republican to win the popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004. No one thought that, we might not ever see a Republican win the popular vote again. So he did win that. But the Democrats, I mean, it was a very close election. You look at a few 100,000 votes in a few states and Harris wins. And I do think, a really big piece of it that was underreported at first, but has been reported a lot since, was that, the number of Democrats who stayed home, millions of Democrats who did not vote. I mean, Trump barely got more than he did last time, but she got millions fewer than Joe Biden did. And just in terms of the growth of the electorate, everyone should have gone up, and she went down considerably. And I think a big reason for that was there were a lot of Democrats, there were a lot of progressive Democrats who couldn't bring themselves to vote for her because of Israel and Gaza, as if Trump would be better for the Palestinians than a Democratic administration. And there were a lot of Democrats who were just not inspired by her, not excited by her, and were like, not going to do it. And that, to me, was the difference in this election.
Bob?
Yeah, well, I was somebody who believed the pollsters, and I have a good friend who's a top pollster in D.C. and nationally known. They all said it was a dead heat. And so the reason I thought that Kamala would probably win was because she had so much more money than Trump. I mean, raised over $1 billion, although now somehow she's in debt, and raised maybe 2 or 3 times what Trump did. And I thought that their ground game, their retail politics, getting people out to vote, would do it. And I thought the abortion issue would be more important than it turned out to be. And I just felt, as the late, great Jess Unruh said, money is the mother's milk of politics, that because they had so much money that they would, in fact, turn out people and not, as Doug said, have so far fewer voters, Democrats turning out. So I thought that she would squeak in because of that, and I was, wrong with everyone else.
I will say my gut told me Trump would win, especially because the polls were 50-50 and she should have been up by a few points. And if she's not, then that's not a good sign on the popular vote. But my head told me, there is no way. There's no way that this convicted felon, accused rapist, sexual predator, con man and liar.
Not rapist.
Yeah.
Well, there are other cases.
Adjudicated,
where he has been accused of rape. I said accused rape.
But
That he could win, because I just thought there's going to be this huge outpouring of women voters who will, even though I had a feeling abortion wasn't as salient an issue this time, the women voters are going to push her over the top in the end. There was so much energy and excitement. And the fact is, the younger voters didn't go for her in the way we thought they would. And a lot of younger men went with him, and that was a big, and the black and Latino vote. that's what cost her.
But let's remember, I mean, she came into the race, the country with a right track, wrong track number that was just a killer. I mean, 70% of Americans thought the country was on a wrong track. Only 40% of them approved of Joe Biden. So that was the beginning of 107 days. She had to turn that around. She was a much better candidate this time than when we saw her in 2019.
Yeah.
She really grew in that, but in my view, she didn't do the one thing she sadly needed to do, which was to throw Joe Biden under the bus. She had to say, hey, I love Joe Biden, but I'm not Joe Biden. I don't agree with him on these issues. To go on The View and say, I can't think of anything I would do differently was a killer line for her.
Yeah, in a change election.
In a change election. She became the incumbent. She should have said, he was the president. I look at what he did, which wasn't much in office, and
I think he actually did a lot.
Made that contrast, but she didn't want to go after Biden, or didn't want to separate herself enough from him. And that, on the spending issue, again, as she did in 2019, she made some incredibly awful choices in terms of spending $600,000 for the set for the Call Me Daddy podcast.
Oh, I didn't even know
Call Me Daddy, right? Yeah, $600,000 on that, or $600,000 a day to rent the Sphere in Las Vegas. Those kind of decisions.
They had money to burn, so
they had money to burn. But I have to say,
I felt a bigger not a bigger mistake, but another mistake in the closing weeks of the campaign. Her focus was Trump's a fascist. Everyone go out and say Trump's a fascist.
Which
hey,
voters
Republicans
didn't care about.
And hey, wavering Republicans, come vote for me. I'm going to parade around with Liz Cheney.
And nobody under 40 knows what a fascist is anyway.
Yeah, I know. There was a focus group where they asked Trump voters, do you think he's authoritarian? Well, what does that mean? I mean, no one even knew what it meant. But what I wanted to say was her whole focus at the end of wavering Republicans, this is who's going to put us over the top. Now, maybe they knew there were a lot of wavering Democrats and they were trying to replace them with Republicans. But if you look at the numbers, they didn't win any new Republican votes. She got exactly the same percent of the Republican vote as Joe Biden did 4 years ago, as Obama did, et cetera. Actually, less than Obama did. So all this time with Liz Cheney didn't bring in any new voters, and it pushed those progressives who were already mad at her farther away. And it told a lot of them, she's cozying up to them, why aren't they appealing to us? And they didn't go out and vote.
And I have to say, I had sort of an unusual experience with this whole election. Because after being a journalist for so many years, I'm now a retired journalist, I actually decided to go out and canvass, be part of the Kamala Harris team on the ground. Maybe some of you did yourselves. I went to Michigan for about 2 weeks and did canvassing. And I have to tell you, it is a whole different point of view. It is a whole different education to talk to voters, to see voters face to face. And what I was seeing in Saginaw, Michigan, which is a place where a lot of manufacturing is deserted, were people who were, whose homes hadn't been fixed up in 40 years. You could see the poverty, how they were hurting. You'd go to the door and they'd tell you they were scared. Or I had, for instance, Vietnam veterans say, well, wait a minute, the Democrats are giving debit cards to the migrants in New York and giving them hotel rooms. Where's my money? And you got that kind of issue. Or, as you said, with young voters, I can't tell you how you would hit maybe 30 doors and nobody would be home, and then you'd hit young voters and they'd go, oh, is there an election? Who's running? I mean, seriously, it was a mind blower to see how many younger voters were completely not into the election at all, or completely, out of touch with it. So I think that, and the fact that when you talk about the spending, I have to say, on the final day of the election, which, on that day we hit 450 doors, and I think this whole idea of get out the vote, which Kamala Harris spent millions and millions of dollars on, Trump spent nothing on that and did it all online, digital, and that was extremely effective.
And he farmed it out to other groups that we thought was going to be a liability.
I think this going door-to-door stuff is 1980s. It's not where you reach voters anymore. And they spent a lot of money on that. On the final day of the election, that little office in Saginaw had maybe 1,000 Harris wall signs, and, I would have to say 500,000 pieces of material that were, and you multiply that by 4,000 offices around the country, and you can see how much money just went down the drain on.
And those people were not going to Taylor Swift concerts.
No. And it's like, this
couldn't
isn't
afford
this isn't where campaigns reach voters anymore, I think, door to door. It is online.
It's interesting
It is,
because
right?
they do feel, I mean, I talked to Christine Pelosi a couple of times during this campaign. They really felt like being out on the doors, as they call it, knocking on the doors, door to door, canvassing. We've got the ground game. They did the old-fashioned in a massive way. And I think a lot of us were fooled maybe into believing that was going to be effective because they were going to turn out these voters, but they didn't.
So there's a lot of talk that the reason the Democrats, despite all that work, didn't connect with a huge swath of voters is they weren't talking about the things that the voters were talking
Right.
about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The economy was.
Yeah, well, and someone in the
Economy
audience
was the
says
thing. It was.
Harris ignored the economy, hard to challenge public perceptions about the cost of groceries, et cetera, rent, et cetera. She needed to do that. Bob, what do you think you've been a strategist and a critic and all of this and active in politics. What do you think the Democrats' biggest mistake was in handling issues?
Not recognizing them. Just that when you were, if you're having trouble buying groceries and Biden or people high up in the administration tell you the numbers have never been better, inflation is down, everything's fine, the economy's humming along, it just says to these voters, you just don't know what you're talking about. You have you don't recognize me, you don't see me, you're not empathetic with me. And Trump has this magical way of, even though he is, let's say, a billionaire and a celebrity, of having people think that, that he's on their side. And Obama was like that, and Reagan was like that, and a lot of really great politicians.
Bill
Clinton was exactly like that. And they may or may not be, but people felt that, that the old analogy is if you've got rats in the basement, you want an exterminator who's going to get rid of the rats. You don't want somebody who's going to talk nicely to the rats or negotiate with the rats. You want them out. And Trump was the guy to get the rats out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he has the populist touch, and it always boggles my mind when I talk to voters who say, he's for people like me, he thinks like me, he's one of us. I'm like, do you have a gold-plated toilet? Do you have a marble bath? No, he's not. It's like, do you wear makeup and get manicures? But he has that populist touch, like Bill Clinton, like Barack Obama, like Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, not so much, but Gore was so stiff that it didn't matter. But it is true that there is a connection that the Democrats just failed to make. And as Bob says, when you tell them, you can say to your blue in the face, look at the inflation coming down, and this is why it went up, but this is how many jobs we created. If they're paying $2 more for everything at the store, they don't want to hear it.
But I assume we're going to talk about what maybe the first 100 days might be like, and this is where the problem is going to come down for Trump.
Right. Prices are not going to go down.
Yeah, he was at ringing the bell on Wall Street, telling those guys, hey, I'm going to lower your corporate taxes to 21%, maybe 15%. I may get it down that way. So he's telling you, and you're going to be richer. And the same day, I gave that interview to Time Magazine. Well, if you don't get the grocery prices down, is that going to be bad for your administration? And he said, it's very hard to get grocery prices down.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
So already it's like the corporate guys are going to get their,
And
goods.
then, of course, that's what's going to happen.
And like the average voter who wants the price of eggs to go down, we've already seen Chipotle, Walmart, Black & Decker. You can name the corporations that have already said with these tariffs, they're going to raise their prices.
Sure.
So,
and that was what amazed me when I would interview voters. I would say, what is it you think Trump's going to do that's going to lower your prices that Biden or Harris didn't do and won't do, and why do you think that's really going to happen? But they just say, he's going to be better for me, he's going to lower the prices, and now they're going to see tariffs, prices go up, taxes cut for the rich and for corporations, and I give him, I think the Republicans will lose the midterms in 26 for that very reason. I don't think, people are going to be quickly disenchanted when things don't go the way they hope they would.
Someone asked a question that I would have worked in anyway, which is, what role did immigration play and migration? And
the immigration issue, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just what you said. They're getting Visa cards and hotel rooms, and what am I getting? And by when the governor of Texas started sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard and New York City and Chicago and so on,
Right.
that was a big deal in terms of, this is not just a Texas problem or an Arizona problem or a California problem. It's, it's everywhere. And I think that, Biden and the Democrats and later Kamala recognized that immigration, open immigration, which is basically what we've had, it was a huge political problem. And, they tried to address it. And the other thing that I think Biden said, well, immigration is down. I mean, illegal immigration is down 30% or whatever. Again, nobody bought that, just like they didn't buy the numbers on the economy or inflation. So they had a real credibility problem. And then Kamala was supposedly in charge of the border. That was one of her first, if not her first duty. And, she had that, forget who she was interviewed by. And it was somebody,
Lester Holt?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
said, "Have you been to the border?" And she said, "No, and I haven't been to Europe either." I'm like, ha ha. So all that stuff didn't help at all.
Former KCBS radio reporter Lester Holt. Anyway, yeah, but now the question on immigration, I mean, a majority of the people do want mass deportation, even a large number of Latino voters. We'll see what he can actually get through and how that plays out. Day one, after he gives that speech and goes back to the White House and starts signing executive orders, who knows what's going to be cut loose that afternoon on January 20th, which happens to be Martin Luther King Day this year. But
Wow. Okay.
but we'll see, how that plays out, because the impact of potentially if he really does try to deport millions of undocumented immigrants, 50% of the workers in California's farm fields are
Yeah,
undocumented.
more than 50. Yeah, it's a majority, strong majority.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at those field and people start paying more for avocados and salad,
Strawberries,
right,
lettuce,
right?
yeah.
Salinas Valley is the salad bowl of the world. I mean, so who's going to pick those?
And many restaurant workers are undocumented, and many of them have been here for years and years and years and have roots and kids here. And
Yeah.
My guess is that he'll do
just criminals.
criminals.
Right, and leave it at that.
Yeah.
And leave it
Look,
at
I
that.
got rid of the
I don't know
riffraff.
about leave it at that, but
Right.
by the time
Right.
even that gets
Right.
through, it'll be
Yeah.
close to midterm.
Well, today in his press conference, he was talking again about the wall and going back and rebuilding the wall. When, in fact, he during his administration, I think heard Daniel Dale of CNN say they only really added maybe 50 miles onto that wall.
Yeah.
They didn't. He takes credit for more.
Which wasn't paid for by Mexico.
Yeah, and it wasn't paid for by Mexico. So
Well, we haven't sent Mexico a bill yet.
I mean,
Our invoicing system.
But the question is, Mexico's worried about, obviously, these deportations, and the tariffs. Between the tariffs and both of these, we could be looking at some real problems and real price increases.
Well, and can he make unilateral tariff decisions when we've got the international trade agreements? I mean, do they need to pull out of that or renegotiate it, or can he do a unilateral? I understand we're not.
And this is where I go back to where are the Democrats speaking up, because there's a lot of things he says he's going to do. Get rid of birthright citizenship. There's this thing called the 14th Amendment.
Well, I think some of the Democrats are probably like, okay, he won. He's promising all these things. Let's let him be hoist on his own petard. Let's let him do the things he said he'd do, and let's see what happens. If they fly, if they're popular, if they backfire. In some ways, some of them probably would rather let him go ahead with it and see what happens, as opposed to keeping him from doing it.
I don't think that's the nature of Democrats.
Yeah.
They're not going to just sit by and say, "Oh, go ahead, President Trump, do your thing."
Well, they have no power, right?
Right. I mean, all they can do.
Well, they have
Well,
power. I mean,
Where?
the House is a
Senate,
three-vote, is going to be
I
a
don't think the
three-vote
Democrats,
majority.
I haven't heard anything about getting rid of the filibuster, have you?
No.
Okay.
The Senate is a small majority, is 6 seats, and the House is going to be 3 if the 3 members go to the cabinet.
That's right,
It'll
right,
be,
right. Yeah.
217 to 214.
Yeah.
You can't lose very many votes there.
Okay. Well, we've got about 10 minutes before we do our news quiz for the audience. So
okay.
I want to talk about some California-specific stuff.
Okay.
I'm going to use the national to segue into that, because there's been talk about what is Kamala Harris's future.
Oh, yeah,
So let's
yeah.
start with your thoughts on that. I mean, there have been a number of
I think
rules.
there's no question she's going to run for governor. She will lead the field. she will be able to, she has the fundraising, Rolodex now that's going to pump her up there. She'll have no problem. I think other people will get out of that race. I think this is the job she originally wanted.
That is true.
Before Gavin Newsom jumped in ahead of her
Right.
on that one,
Right.
right? Remember
Yep.
when Barbara Boxer left the Senate? So I think I don't think she can run for president again.
don't either.
Some people are suggesting that may be what she's going to,
I think she would like to run for president again. I think, I would hope realistically she sees that if you can't beat Donald Trump, you're probably not going to be a more conventional Republican in 4 years,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So,
the advance,
and
maybe.
a woman of color, obviously that hurts her nationally too. She would be the first non-white male governor of California.
That's right.
The whole field is that, right? All
Right.
the
And
Democrats.
first
are
woman
throwing-
governor, yeah,
First
right.
woman. But also, yeah, I think if you look at it, she doesn't really have anywhere to, either she goes to the Goldman School at Cal, like every other Democrat who leaves office, or she, gives speeches and writes books. But if she wants to stay active in politics, she can't, I don't think she can run again in 28. So
No.
governor is really the only thing there is for her to run for.
No.
It's already a crowded field. There's 5 major Democrats, and there's Katie Porter's taking a very close look at it.
Yeah.
Rob
I think
Bonta
she's
wants
waiting
to run.
to see.
Exactly.
I think for,
Javier
the whole
Becerra,
Kamala
Rob
thing is
Bonta, Katie Porter.
frozen the field.
But if Kamala runs, none of those people run.
Right.
And others drop out. I don't know about Eleni Kounalakis if she drops out. As
I think she'll
lieutenant
drop
governor,
out,
but
yes.
Kamala probably clears the field. And then it's a question of, okay, can she win statewide where she did not as well as Joe Biden in the presidential race against whatever Republican,
And what
whoever they put up.
Republican could?
Well, if they put up a very, some conservative Republican who's well-funded, it'll be closer than people think, just because there'll be people who won't want to vote for a woman or won't want to vote for a black woman, an Asian woman, but she would probably win.
Yeah.
So there really is nowhere else for her to go than run for governor.
Okay, I think you're talking rationally about
I tend to think rationally, which is often wrong.
about her future.
What do you think, Bob?
And I think once you run for president and it was a close election, I don't think that ever gets out of your system. So I'm not sure that she.
But I think she's thinking
True.
2032, 2036, after she's rehabilitated herself by being governor for a few years.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that if she's elected governor, don't forget the last person that ran for president and lost and then ran for governor in
Richard
California and lost was Nixon.
We didn't have
He
him to
came
kick
back.
around anymore for
That's
6
right.
years.
Which is probably his best quote. But, I think once you get it, once that bug is in you, she's going to sit there with Doug and say, if only this, if only that, if only that, I could have won easily.
Sure.
And that's, and it's not going
But
to go away.
she's, to some extent, damaged goods. She comes back in a couple of years, she'll have to face a very tough primary.
Okay, I'm not saying she'd win. I'm
Right,
just
right,
saying
right.
that I'm not sure that she's not going to get in the race.
Right. I mean, you may be right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the debate they're having in her household is, do I run for governor or do I bide my time, keep myself active, and go for president again in 4 years? I'm sure that's the discussion they're having.
And I think the presidential field will be pretty crowded for the.
It will. You've got a
yeah,
whole
very.
bunch of
That's
people.
not going to be an easy one.
No, it won't.
And it's not a given that she
she wins
would
the
come
primary.
out of that
Yeah.
ahead either.
I'm not sure she would have been the nominee if they'd had a real convention.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
a
not
real
sure.
primary.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
Well, okay, so the governor's position is going to be open because of, and this leads into the next question, what
Gavin
next for
Newsom?
Gavin Newsom?
Gavin Newsom, I felt all along would make a good cabinet secretary in a Kamala Harris administration.
yeah, that's where we thought he was.
I mean, I was like, I could see him as a secretary of something,
Yeah, commerce,
but
whatever,
since
right.
that's not going to happen, he has always said he does not want to be president and he won't run for president. Very few people still believe that.
Yeah.
Everyone assumes he will run in 28. He's going to have nothing better to do. There's nothing else for him to run for. Again, these Senate seats are full now for years to come with Padilla and Schiff, unless he wants to wait and go into a cabinet, then 28 makes sense for him. He's certainly laying the groundwork to do it. I still am not positive he's really going to do it. And no California Democrat has ever been elected president. And to think that Newsom will be, or that Harris will be, I'm not so sure. He doesn't play so well in Saginaw, Michigan.
No,
Or in Iowa,
he doesn't. And,
or in
and I
Wisconsin.
actually think California is kind of a toxic brand
Yeah.
for a lot of this country.
But he was, on November 6th, he was the happiest Democrat in the country.
Right. Right? Well, except now he doesn't get to be Secretary of Housing and Urban Development or whatever he was going to be.
Yeah,
But yeah.
I mean,
dodged that bullet.
yeah, I don't think, and I also don't think Gavin, as good as he is in speaking to Californians, and he has been, I think. You're right. Speaking to red state folks in Saginaw, Michigan, I don't think that's his strength.
And to be devil's advocate again, I think speaking to blue state Democrats
Yeah.
in flyover country,
Right.
he doesn't go over.
Yeah.
And he would come with so much baggage. I mean, Kamala Harris, you couldn't really lay California homelessness, California crime. They tried to pin all the crime, et cetera, on her. She was Attorney General. She was the DA. He's the governor.
Yeah.
I mean, any problem that anyone associates California is his problem.
That's why, yeah.
And it's going to be very difficult to overcome that.
Okay, let's get a little bit more local now. You live in the Oakland area.
Oh, that's
I live
right.
in Oakland. She
Yeah,
lives
we
in
both.
Oakland.
You're
we both
going to,
live in
okay,
Oakland.
He's
you're,
a refugee up to Sonoma.
Right.
you're going to get a new mayor. What do we know about the process now? I mean, when does the
Well, we know
election-
the process. So Nikki Fortunato Bass, who is the city council president, will be the interim mayor, the acting mayor, until the new city council that we just elected takes office in January, and then they will elect a new city council president. She will step down to go because she was elected to the County Board of Supervisors, and that new city council president will become the acting mayor. And then they will have a special election in April to elect a new mayor.
So it's kind of a Warholian for 15 minutes. Everyone will be
Exactly.
mayor of Oakland.
Kind of the way
And
San
then-
Francisco was after Ed Lee died, in that you'll have a
Yeah.
series of acting mayors. You had Mark Farrell, you had London Breed. We're going to have Nikki Fortunato Bass, then someone else, and then an election in April.
And there's a lot of
which
talk that Barbara Lee
might run.
is gonna-
Marshawn Lynch might run.
Any idea who would be strong candidates?
Lauren Taylor, who was on the city council before and narrowly lost to Sheng Tao 4 years ago and actually finished first, but lost on the ranked choice voting. He's already in the race and running, and I think at the moment, what I describe him as the front runner.
Yeah.
A lot of people like him. There were a lot of people who got buyer's remorse when
Although
Sheng
Barbara
Tao-
Lee, name recognition.
Obviously, if Barbara Lee gets in, she's the
Yeah.
field clearing
But, yeah.
elephant in the room. But, we all saw what happened when Ron Dellums was mayor, right? I still remember sitting down with him for an interview in which I said, are you really going to care about potholes and all the different things, the day-to-day, roll up your sleeves when you're mayor? And he said, you're asking me the wrong questions. We're going to make Oakland a model city. You're doing this grand vision. And then he won, and he couldn't have liked that job less.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was completely
Yeah.
absent
It's
and
a-
never anywhere.
It's a terrible job.
It was a terrible
It's a
mayor.
terrible job.
And he hated it.
Yeah.
Unlike Jerry Brown, who really got into it
Yeah.
and was a really effective mayor.
Yeah, yeah.
So if Barbara Lee is ready to be, a hands-on, roll-up-your-sleeves mayor, she could do it. But if she's just looking for another job to fill, then
And what you saw in Oakland, by the way, with the recall of the mayor and with the district attorney, was even in a very liberal bastion like Oakland, you saw some real concerns about crime.
yeah.
That overshadowed everything else. And this is where I think a lot of the Democrats were surprised at how 2/3 of the voters in both of these cases just hit the eject button on those two office holders. So I think that's a message also to the Democratic Party that is an issue they cannot ignore.
People are really fed up with crime, homelessness, quality of
Saw
life.
that in LA too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've come to the end of our program. I want to thank our panelists, Bob Gardner, Doug Sovereign, and Carla Marinucci, for a
Thank
great
you.
conversation. Thanks to all of you and everyone watching and listening online. Have a great week. We'll see you again in the new year.